were sitting in the third row of a beautifully curated venue.
Right.
The officiant raises a hand, takes a breath, and the entire room just plunges into this vacuum of absolute pin drop silence.
This highly engineered environment.
Exactly. I mean, the doors to the outside world are heavily insulated and pulled completely shut. The lighting is dimmed just so. You can literally hear the rustle of a silk dress shifting.
Or, like an uncle in the back row clearing his throat.
Yeah. Because we, as a modern society, have collectively decided that our most profound life-altering transitions require this kind of hushed, reverent isolation.
Well, we treat love like it belongs in a museum, right?
Yeah.
Just quiet, protected, and cordoned off from the chaos of the street.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the fascinating part for you, the listener who studies human behavior, isn't the silence itself. It's the whiplash.
Oh, the whiplash is intense.
Right. Fast forward maybe 60 minutes. The couple signs the registry, the heavy doors fly open, they step out onto the asphalt, and suddenly that pristine, engineered reverence is violently shattered by the most chaotic, aggressively joyful, ear-splitting noise humanly possible.
It is a deliberate sensory assault.
We're talking about a fleet of vehicles draped in ribbons and dragging actual garbage like tin cans, old shoes, and they just start having engines. Drivers are laying on their horns with zero hesitation.
Just creating this moving wall of deafening sound that hijacks the entire neighborhood.
Yeah, you go from a reverent whisper to an industrial megaphone in the blink of an eye. And this deep dive today is all about exploring that wild transition. Welcome to the show, by the way. Today's exploration is definitely going to be a bit louder and more energetic than usual.
It completely upends the modern expectation of what a wedding is supposed to look and sound like.
It really does. I mean, we spend months, sometimes years, and tens of thousands of dollars to curate this frictionless, elegant aesthetic. And then, at the absolute peak of the celebration, the couple actively chooses to introduce pure, unadulterated, unpredictable noise.
They just abandon the velvet rope and embrace the chaos of the public street.
And that is the core mystery we are tearing apart today. We have a comprehensive source document detailing this specific tradition, its roots, its modern applications, and the logistical side of pulling it off. Our mission is to figure out the why and the how.
Why do humans harbor this primal urge to weaponize their car horns the second they tie the knot?
Exactly. And from a purely practical standpoint, how is anyone managing the sheer logistical nightmare of leading 20 distracted, emotional drivers through downtown traffic without causing a multi-car pileup?
Yeah, the logistics alone require a staggering amount of infrastructural planning. But what's fascinating here is that the impulse driving that planning is much older than the combustion engine.
Right, because we look at a line of honking cars today and just see a quirky, loud party.
Yeah, but the architectural DNA of that noise is deeply rooted in European superstition and a very specific utilitarian function, honestly.
Which was survival, right.
Yeah.
The historical lineage traces heavily back to regions like Italy, Poland, and Greece.
Exactly.
And I mean, those are cultures that are already stereotyped, often affectionately, as being incredibly expressive.
Yeah.
But you're saying the noise wasn't just an overflow of passion.
No, not originally. It was a supernatural defense mechanism.
A defense mechanism.
Yeah. In agrarian and tightly knit ancient communities, any major life transition was viewed as a moment of extreme spiritual vulnerability.
Right. You're leaving the protection of your family's home.
And entering a liminal space, that journey between the old life and the new life. In these cultures, extreme happiness was believed to attract the evil eye.
Oh, like malicious spirits drawn to human joy.
Precisely.
So it's basically that psychological concept of the universe demanding a toll. If you are too happy, the universe or the spirits or your jealous neighbors will try to balance the scales by introducing tragedy. So you create a sonic shield. It's almost like an ancient vehicular version of knocking on wood.
That's a great analogy. You deploy acoustic armor. The loud noises originally took the form of villagers banging heavy iron pots together.
Wow.
Or ringing massive church bells, firing muskets into the air, or even aggressively snapping whips. It was designed to literally scare away the spiritual threats.
Just creating a chaotic frequency that evil entities supposedly could not penetrate.
Right. And then, when the automobile arrived on the scene, the car horn simply replaced the iron pot. It was louder, more sustained, and required way less physical exertion.
I mean, that makes total sense mechanically. But bridging the gap from a Greek village warding off the evil eye in 1910 to a massive coordinated procession of SUVs blocking an intersection in modern-day Toronto or Vancouver that requires a massive cultural leap.
It does. Geographically and culturally, the environments could not be more different.
So how does that happen?
The leap happens because of the specific mechanics of Canadian multiculturalism. Unlike a purely assimilationist model where immigrant traditions are expected to just be quietly absorbed and neutralized.
Right, the whole melting pot versus mosaic thing.
Exactly. The Canadian framework operates more like a cultural mosaic. When successive waves of Italian, Greek, and Polish immigrants arrived, they didn't leave the noise behind. They performed it on new streets.
But as the neighborhoods blended, the specific rigid superstitions of the evil eye probably began to dilute,
Well,
right?
it did. But what remained was the visceral, emotional release of the noise. The dogma faded, but the mechanics survived.
It became democratized. I mean, you could have a couple with absolutely no European heritage whatsoever, attend a friend's wedding, witness the absolute adrenaline of this honking convoy tearing down the street.
And immediately decide they want that exact same energy for their own wedding.
Yeah. It ceases to be an exclusively Italian or Polish ritual and morphs into this shared, localized standard of celebration.
It evolves from a niche protective ritual into a generalized broadcast of triumph. So the original symbolism fractures into four distinct modern pillars, essentially.
Let's break those down.
Sure, the first pillar is simply the physical manifestation of an uncontainable internal state, the celebration of love.
Right. The emotion is too large for the physical body, so it requires mechanical amplification. I understand the internal mechanics of that. You're bursting with adrenaline, so you lay on the horn.
Exactly. But the second driver, the public announcement, is where things get a bit more complex.
Okay, this is where I actually have to push back. Hard.
I thought you might.
Because the idea is that the couple is announcing their joy to the community, right? But let's look at the reality of modern urban density. If I am stuck in gridlock traffic on a Tuesday afternoon, trying to get a sleeping toddler home, or rushing to a shift at work, and a 15-car parade cuts me off while blaring their horns, I am not experiencing a public announcement of joy.
You're experiencing a headache.
I'm experiencing severe auditory harassment. I view it as an arrogant sense of vehicular entitlement. Why do modern couples feel they have the right to force their private celebration onto an unwilling public?
Well, the source text actually addresses this, because the modern urban environment is inherently isolating, and the convoy is a deliberate disruption of that isolation.
Okay, but it's still disruptive.
You are right to point out the friction. It is annoying to the commuter, but sociologically that friction is the entire point. In a busy city, we walk around in heavily fortified individual bubbles.
Yeah, noise-canceling headphones, tinted windows, hyper-focused routines.
Exactly. The public announcement forces a rupture in that routine. It demands that strangers, even unwillingly, pause their individual narratives to acknowledge a collective human milestone, even if just for a moment.
So you are arguing, or the text is arguing, that forcing a commuter to experience a micro moment of rage is somehow beneficial because it breaks their isolation.
I mean, it isn't just about the rage, though. Observationally, the initial shock or annoyance usually gives way to a begrudging acknowledgement.
You think so?
Yeah. The visual of the bride waving from a sunroof, the sheer absurdity of a decorated minivan, it forces a fleeting shared moment of humanity. It turns an anonymous, cold stretch of asphalt into a temporary communal stage.
I see what you're saying.
Even if the commuter just honks back aggressively, they've been pulled into the social fabric of the event. They are no longer a passive driver. They are a participant in a localized ritual.
It is forcing a connection in an environment designed to prevent connection. I can concede that, even if I still think it's deeply annoying if you're the one stuck at the red light.
That's fair.
But that brings us to the third pillar, which circles back to the supernatural roots we talked about earlier, warding off negativity.
Right.
You mentioned the dogma faded, but you don't think it has entirely disappeared today?
Not entirely, no. It has mutated from a literal belief in demons into a subconscious psychological clearing mechanism.
Like what?
Even for highly secular modern couples, there is still an underlying anxiety about the fragility of happiness. The loud noises serve as a ritualistic clearing of the air. It is the sonic equivalent of burning sage in a new home.
Oh, that's interesting. So they don't necessarily think a literal ghost is chasing their sedan.
No, it's that the sheer volume of the procession acts as a psychological reset button. It loudly declares the end of the stressful planning phase and the beginning of the actual marriage.
A palate cleanser for the nervous system.
Exactly. Which brings us to the fourth, and arguably the most vital, pillar in today's landscape. Community connection.
Yeah, if we look at the trajectory of the wedding industry over the last 3 decades, it has become relentlessly exclusive.
Highly exclusive.
You have an ironclad guest list. You have a venue with security. You are paying upwards of $200 for a plated dinner. By definition, a modern wedding is an exercise in deciding who is not important enough to be in the room.
It is the ultimate velvet rope. The modern wedding privatizes joy. It locks it behind closed doors and monetizes access to it.
And the car procession is a direct physical rebellion against that privatization.
Yes.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it spills the celebration out of the country club and back into the public square.
It democratizes the joy. It tells the neighborhood, hey, you didn't make the cut for the expensive chicken dinner, but our happiness still belongs to these streets.
It allows the people who didn't get a gold foil invitation, the neighbors, the local shop owners, the random pedestrians, to bear witness to the union. It strengthens the social bonds of the immediate geography.
Because for centuries, a marriage wasn't just a legal contract between two people, right? It was a structural change to the community itself.
The village needed to know the couple was now a single unit, and the procession mimics that ancient village dynamic within a sprawling modern metropolis.
Okay, so the psychological foundation is incredibly robust. It's about protection, disruption, and democratization. But let's transition to the actual physical execution of this.
The modern twist.
Yeah, because the aesthetic has evolved significantly from a rusty soup can tied to a horse buggy. You are looking at fleets of vehicles that have been heavily engineered for visual and auditory impact. What are we actually seeing out there today?
The visual upgrades are extensive. It is no longer an afterthought. We are seeing highly coordinated floral installations that rival the centerpieces at the reception.
Wow, really? On the cars?
Yes, custom pallographed banners, dense clusters of specific color-coordinated balloons, window paint used as a cohesive graphic design element.
Oh, like the whole just married aesthetic, but elevated.
Exactly. And the vehicles themselves have shifted. The couple rarely leads in their daily commuter car anymore. They are sourcing vintage luxury vehicles.
Like a pristine 1960s convertible.
Or a classic Rolls-Royce, serving as the aesthetic anchor for a fleet of trailing, aggressively decorated sedans.
But here's where it gets really interesting, though. It's not just about what the cars look like. It is about the acoustic engineering of the parade.
The rhythm of joy.
Right. The honking is rarely just a chaotic, continuous blare. There is a linguistic element to the noise.
There is a distinct cadence. If everyone just leans their forehead on the steering wheel and holds the horn down indefinitely.
It just sounds like gridlock panic.
Yeah.
Or an emergency.
It signals distress. Exactly. To convert that noise into a signal of celebration, it requires rhythm. It's the classic shave and a haircut beat or synchronized staccato blasts.
That rhythm explicitly signals intent. It tells the human brain, which is wired to detect anomalies in the environment, hey, this noise is organized, intentional, and safe.
Organized joy. But the modern adaptations of this tradition introduce a massive paradox.
Oh, the eco-friendly stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're seeing a significant rise in couples utilizing electric vehicles or even organizing bicycle convoys under the banner of being eco-friendly.
Right. I was wondering about this. Because if the entire historical utilitarian purpose of the tradition is to create an impenetrable wall of deafening noise, replacing a V8 engine and a heavy car horn with a silent EV or a bicycle bell completely neuters the tradition.
You're bringing a whisper to a heavy metal concert.
Exactly. Doesn't the EV completely destroy the functional purpose of the convoy?
It would if they relied solely on the vehicle's native mechanics. But this is where cultural adaptation is so fascinating. When the abrasive mechanical noise of the engine and the horn is removed, it is immediately replaced by curated, amplified audio.
So music integration.
Yes, they turn the convoy into a rolling boombox.
That's hilarious. So they just drop all the windows or utilize the open air of a bicycle fleet and broadcast high-decibel celebratory playlists through massive portable speakers.
Or upgraded car audio systems. The music achieves the exact same acoustic shielding and public disruption as the car horn, but it changes the emotional texture of the noise.
It shifts the disruption from an aggressive alarm to an undeniable localized party.
Exactly. The eco-friendly aspect removes the carbon emissions, but the music integration ensures the spatial dominance remains intact.
So you still get the community disruption, you still get the sonic shield, but with a different acoustic flavor. You are warding off the evil eye with a heavy bass line instead of a horn.
Pretty much.
But as you describe this color-coordinated vintage cars, synchronized rhythmic honking, fleets of bicycles blasting synchronized playlists, my anxiety as a logistical planner is spiking.
Oh, it's a nightmare.
The theory of a beautiful, cohesive convoy is great. The reality of moving 20 highly distracted emotional drivers through the unpredictable ecosystem of a modern city is terrifying.
It's chaos.
You hit one yellow light, half the convoy gets cut off, and suddenly your coordinated parade is just 3 lost groomsmen wandering around a suburban cul-de-sac.
The friction between the romantic idea of the convoy and the brutal reality of traffic infrastructure is severe. Navigating this requires a militant level of organization.
Our source material breaks this down into basically 5 non-negotiable phases of planning, right?
Yes, and the absolute first barrier is municipal legislation. Check your local regulations.
Okay. Which means checking the local noise bylaws. Because the urge to be loud does not supersede the legal reality of residential quiet zones, hospital districts, or time-of-day restrictions.
No, it does not. If you blindly lead a blaring convoy past a hospital, you aren't just being annoying, you are actively breaking the law.
And that joyful public announcement ends with the police pulling over the bride, which no one wants.
Which necessitates the second phase, hyper-specific route architecture. You cannot wing a procession.
You have to organize the route carefully.
The route must be scouted for visibility, safety, and flow. You want a path that offers high visual impact main thoroughfares, scenic backdrops for the trailing photographers, but actively avoids known gridlock choke points.
Or complex multi-lane roundabouts where the convoy is mathematically guaranteed to splinter.
Exactly. And once you map that flawless route, you have to download that map into the brains of 20 different drivers.
Which brings us to the communication barrier. You are dealing with guests who are likely from out of town, unfamiliar with the city's one-way streets, and operating under a significant cognitive load because they're trying to celebrate.
Sending a vague text message that says, "Follow the white Rolls-Royce," is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
The communication has to be exact. Meeting points, specific departure times, the exact sequence of the cars, and the contingency plans for when, not if, but when someone hits a red light and gets separated.
And this ties directly into the aesthetic coordination, the creative decorating. If you want a cohesive visual, you have to distribute the ribbons, the window markers, and the banners in advance, ensuring they are applied uniformly.
And applying them safely.
Right, safety first. Because a massive just married banner that isn't properly secured with industrial zip ties becomes a lethal projectile on a highway.
It really does. Or a floral arrangement blocking a driver's rearview mirror that transforms a celebratory vehicle into a massive liability.
People are distracted. They're cheering out the window. They're filming with their phones. They're watching the car in front of them instead of the brake lights.
The safety parameters are the difference between a successful tradition and an insurance claim. You need to follow traffic rules, avoid excessive honking in restricted areas, maintain safe distances,
Maintain a strictly enforced following distance, ban sudden lane changes, and dictate where and when the rhythmic honking is actually permitted.
right, and managing all of these variables simultaneously, route, legalities, aesthetics, and safety, requires the appointment of a dedicated lead coordinator.
Basically, the convoy needs an air traffic controller.
That is the perfect analogy.
Because you cannot expect the couple who are currently sitting in the back of the vintage car drinking champagne to manage the gap distance of the 4th SUV in the line.
No, the coordinator is the unsung hero holding a walkie-talkie or managing a hyperactive group chat.
Ensuring the photographer's chase car is in position to capture the drone footage without getting rear-ended. It is an overwhelming amount of responsibility to place on a friend or family member who's supposedly there to enjoy a party.
It is an almost impossible cognitive load for a single human being relying on scattered text messages. And this specific failure point, the moment where a beautiful cultural tradition collapses under the weight of modern logistical complexity, is exactly why specialized digital infrastructure has entered the space.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is where Weddizer comes in.
Yes, this is exactly why couples try to use Weddizer to salvage the tradition.
Let's break down the mechanics of this, because we aren't just talking about a shared Google Calendar. Weddizer essentially acts as the central nervous system for the entire celebration.
It takes the terrifying, chaotic variables of coordinating 20 massive metal machines and digitizes the control room. It isn't just a generic planner.
Right. The text highlights how it addresses the human error inherent in group coordination. First off, it functions as a cultural discovery engine.
Exactly. A couple might vaguely know they want a loud car parade, but they don't understand the necessary cadence, the aesthetic options, or the historical context we just discussed.
So the software provides the blueprint for the tradition itself. It offers inspiration for how to safely integrate the ribbons, the themes, and the music.
But the real power is in the logistical mapping. When you try to use Weddizer, you literally draw the route architecture within the platform.
You can flag the hospital zones to avoid noise violations.
You can drop a digital pin at the exact scenic overlook where the videographer needs to be waiting. You eliminate the guesswork of, I think we take a left at the old gas station.
And more importantly, you eliminate the fragmentation of communication.
Yes, seamlessly coordinating with guests.
Instead of the air traffic controller trying to manage 3 different WhatsApp groups, 2 text chains, and a series of frantic phone calls while driving, the software centralizes the broadcast.
The safety guidelines, the strict rules about following distances, the warnings about securing decorations, the contingency route if the highway is closed, are delivered synchronously to every participant.
It provides a single source of truth. So if the groomsman in the 6th car gets separated at a traffic light, he doesn't need to panic and speed through a yellow light to catch up, risking an accident.
He just looks at the centralized map on the app, sees the next designated rally point, and regroups safely.
By encouraging the convoy to try to use Weddizer, the couple effectively offloads the immense stress of the air traffic controller onto a digital framework.
It is the ultimate bridge between ancient tradition and modern convenience. It proves that a society doesn't have to abandon complex, messy physical traditions just because they are difficult to organize in a modern city.
They simply need the appropriate logistical infrastructure to support the chaos, maintaining a modern, organized wedding plan while still honoring loud, messy, joyful traditions. So what does this all mean? When the couple invests the time to map the route, distribute the decorations, designate the coordinator, and utilize the software to keep everyone alive and on track, what is the actual return on investment? Why endure the friction?
The sociological and emotional ROI is massive, and our source outlines 4 distinct ways this pays off. First, it ensures a deeply memorable experience through the sheer power of pattern interruption.
Explain that. What do you mean by pattern interruption?
Well, the human brain stops recording memories when it knows what to expect. If you attend 5 weddings in a year, the ceremonies, the cocktail hours, the speeches, they all bleed together into a single generic memory because the pattern is identical.
Breaking out of the traditional wedding routine.
Right. The sudden, adrenaline-fueled insertion of a high-speed, deafening convoy shatters that pattern. It forces the brain to start recording again.
It is impossible to be on autopilot when you're hanging out of a window with a cowbell.
Very true. Which leads directly to the second payoff, inclusive celebration.
Ah, yes. We discussed the velvet rope of the reception earlier.
But even for the guests who are invited inside, their role is largely passive. They sit in the pew, they sit at the table, they watch the couple perform the rituals.
The car procession obliterates that dynamic. It demands active participation. Guests are not just passive observers.
The guests are decorating the cars, they are navigating the route, they are creating the acoustic shield. They are no longer an audience. They are co-creators of the event's energy.
Passive observation versus active generation. When you build something together, even if it's just a temporary wall of noise, the psychological investment in the couple's success skyrockets.
And that shared adrenaline drives the third payoff, the emotional impact. The friction of the planning, the stress of the traffic, the overwhelming joy of the public spectacle, it binds the participants together.
The shared joy creates lasting memories. You might forget the flavor of the wedding cake, but you will never forget the sheer terror and elation of trying to keep your decorated Honda Civic perfectly aligned behind a vintage convertible while blasting music through downtown.
Exactly. And that visceral, unscripted reality fuels the fourth and currently most dominant driver of this tradition's resurgence. It is aggressively social media worthy.
This is a fascinating meta detail from the source text. When you look at the metadata surrounding this tradition, the SEO tags like Wedding Convoy Canada, just married car ideas, and the incredibly high click-through rates on YouTube titles like Why Canadian Weddings Have Honking Car Parades, it reveals a massive digital appetite for this specific real-world behavior.
This raises an important question about our digital diet. Why are millions of people who have absolutely zero connection to the couple actively seeking out and watching videos of strangers honking their horns?
Right. Why do we care so much?
Because the vast majority of the content we consume online is hyper-curated. It is filtered, scripted, perfectly lit, and completely silent. It is aesthetically flawless, but emotionally sterile.
So a video of a messy, loud, unpredictable car convoy cutting through real traffic is an injection of raw, unfiltered reality.
It is authentic joy. And authenticity is the most scarce commodity on the internet. It proves that this tradition is visually stunning and highly searchable. People are actively looking for unique ways to celebrate.
People are starving for unscripted humanity. So they watch these videos, which validates the couple's desire to be loud, which encourages more couples to try to use Weddizer and online content creators to organize their own convoys, which generates more videos.
It is a massive self-sustaining feedback loop. The internet, a completely silent and invisible network, is acting as a global megaphone for the most physical, noisy, and localized tradition imaginable.
It is a profound irony. The digital world is actively rescuing and amplifying an ancient physical practice. Let's just pull all these threads together to summarize this deep dive.
Sure.
We started by looking at the silence of the modern ceremony and uncovered the ancient, desperate need to shatter that silence with an acoustic shield to protect against the evil eye, those ancient European superstitions of warding off spirits. We traced how the multicultural Canadian mosaic stripped away the supernatural dogma, but kept the visceral mechanics, transforming a defensive tactic into a democratic broadcast of love.
We debated the inherent friction of forcing that joy onto an isolated urban public.
And recognized how the aesthetic evolution from tin cans to rhythmic, music-integrated, eco-friendly convoys requires a staggering level of logistical precision to safely move a convoy.